Good morning, friends. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a play, A Mouthful of Birds, written by Carl Churchill and David Lan. Now, Carl Churchill, a British playwright, was born in 1938. She is famous for dramatizing the abuses of power, for her non-naturalistic techniques, and for her exploration of sexual politics and feminist themes. Her famous works include Serious Money, Blue Heart, and Far Away. And David Lan, an African-born British playwright, was born in 1952. He is famous for being a theatre producer, director, and social anthropologist. He gained a BA at the University of Cape Town. He was also the artistic director of Young Vic Theatre in London from 2000 until 2008. His popular works include Exchange and Divide, Screen 1. Moving on to the play, A Mouthful of Birds, we see the excessive blend of various themes like anxiety, passion, violence, and sexuality. The play is in 2 acts, and this play has 7 separate stories, each with a prominent character. The characters of the 7 stories are Lena, Marcia, Doreen, Yvonne, Paul, Dan, and Derek. The lives of these characters are not given on a complete stretch, but it is intermingled. Like you can see Lena's life being presented, and then we move to the story of Doreen, and then to Derek, and so on. And for convenience and clarity, we are going to look at these 7 stories separately. Churchill and Lan worked with the Joint Stock Theatre Group to create a contemporary play of startling intensity, combining drama and dance. The play portrays the transformation in the lives of these characters after being possessed by a spirit. The spirit can either be of a pagan origin, or it is the strong desire of the people to transform their lives for better future. So towards the end of the play, we see the epilogues by these characters, which shows what has happened to them after being possessed by the spirits. So the play, A Mouthful of Birds, is based on the Athenian playwright Euripides' play, The Bacchae. Now, let's see the story of the Bacchae. In Thebes, Zeus, who is known as the king of gods, takes fancy to Cadmus' daughter Semele, and she later becomes pregnant. Later, Semele is duped by Zeus' wife Hera, where she compels Semele to demand to Zeus to appear in his divine form. When he appears in his divine form, Semele dies in the heat of his blazing glory. Zeus rescues his unborn child, Dionysus, and stitches him into his thigh until it's time for the youngest of the Olympian gods to be born. As a new god, Dionysus must have followers, and he starts in the east before returning to his Greek hometown of Thebes. Dionysus is also known as Bacchus, and he tells us where he has been and also says that the Thebans are refusing to worship him. He then made all the women of Thebes to move to the mountains to celebrate him along with nature. He has dressed himself as a human being and leads a group of Bacchants from the east. The new ruler of Thebes is Pentheus, the cousin of Dionysus, and he is very certain of keeping the exotic god away. Later, Dionysus, disguised as a stranger, has been caught by the followers of Pentheus, but Dionysus escapes. Later, a herdsman arrives to convey about the women in the mountain, including Pentheus' mother, Agave, who began ravaging the local livestock. So Dionysus convinces Pentheus to disguise as a female follower of the god, that is, a Maenad, to get a clear picture of these deeds. Pentheus dresses in long skirts and wigs. He climbs on a fir tree and the other Maenads attack him. Agave, the mother of Pentheus, rips her son to death, thinking that she has killed a lion. Cadmus then reveals to his daughter that she has killed her own son. She weeps, and Dionysius appears in his true form and banishes Agave from Thebes and ordains that Cadmus and his wife will turn into snakes, destined to invade Greek lands with a horde of barbarians. So, that's the story of the Bacchae. We can trace the elements of pleasure, power, and violence in the play. And speaking about Dionysus, he is the Greek god of winemaking, orchards, festivity, insanity, fertility, religious ecstasy, theatre, and fruit vegetation. So, as said earlier, we have 7 stories within the play. In between certain scenes, Dionysus dances, which indicates freedom or liberation. Now, we are going to see the 7 separate stories within the play. The first story deals with the life of Lena, who is married. Her husband is Roy and they have a daughter, Sally. She was a very naive and gentle lady before being possessed by the spirit. She can't even witness the skinning of a rabbit. Later, she is possessed by a spirit, and the fictitious nature of the spirit is revealed by the fact that only Lena could see and hear her. The spirit shows faults with Roy and asks her to kill her baby. The spirit orders her to kill the baby because it is the baby who is directly connected to Roy. Later, Lena drowns her baby to death in a bathtub. So, we can conclude that Lena is a mother suffering from puerperal psychosis, that is postpartum depression. The blood oozing out from the rabbit instigated thoughts relating to her motherhood, menstruation, and also her first consummation. So, she is in a way, as said by many critics, saved another Lena from falling into the patriarchy. The story shows the importance of giving a person dignity and the necessity of rendering support to women while they undergo physical and psychological changes. So, in the epilogue, it is being said that every day for Lena is a struggle, and that is all right for her, which indicates her absolute acceptance of and readiness to fight against the odds that life may offer. So, that's the first story, the story of Lena. Now, let's move on to the second story, the story of Marcia. Marcia is a receptionist, originally from Trinidad, who is looked upon as an object by her boss, Colin, for satisfying his sexual appetite, which is evident from the fact that he mentions about the snug fit of her trousers. She is later possessed by the spirit Sibyl, aptly named after the classical predecessor. She also acts as a channel for a spirit called Baron Sunday. Baron Sunday was a metropolis crime lord who killed people using voodoo. So, Marcia loses her power and Sibyl takes over. In the end, She is on a boat and hopes she will never wake to see the sky without a star. So this story shows the situation when the European notions take control over and the natives are suppressed. The traces of imperialism can also be seen in this. So she imitates the oppressor as she did in the introduction by taking on the imperial accent. Finally, she is released to a place on the ocean where she belongs and does not belong. She floats and adapts. She is the outsider who finds a place, but never a static one. As analyzed by many critics, Mariya initiates 4 conversations at once. The first one with the audience, the second with the client, the third with the inappropriately forward boss Colin, and the fourth with the unnamed caller with whom she speaks in a West Indian accent. So, under the domain of this story, we could discuss male gaze theory popularized by Laura Mulvey. So, this is a sexualized way of portraying women. By objectifying women, the male gaze represents women through sexual desires of heterosexual male viewers. It depicts the female body and personality as an object for men to view, own and conquer. So, in the epilogue, we see Mariya listening to her inner voice, and she undergoes a transformation from her earlier muted self. So, that is the story of Mariya. Now, we are moving on to the third story, that is the story of Yvonne. So, Yvonne performs acupuncture on a tense client who slips into baby talk as she works on him. The backend takes domination over Yvonne, and that is a bit more symbolic because she is also possessed by her addiction to alcohol. Her mother observes that Yvonne is losing control over herself and insists that Yvonne is cutting her up bit by bit like a pig. The story never presents Yvonne as a person who does anything blatantly irrational. But the potential impact of alcoholism on society cannot be ignored. The terrible pain and stressful life of alcohol addicts and the self-injury they cause frames the story. She undergoes a transformation and takes up a role. Towards the end, Yvonne becomes a butcher. She spends all day cutting and hacking. She says that she feels the strength of a body. She asserts her identity by breaking the established roles assigned for a woman in the society by taking up the job of a butcher. So, that is the third story, the story of Yvonne. Now, we are moving to the fourth story. The fourth story is about Doreen. Doreen is a secretary. The story of Doreen shows the conflict in Doreen's and Ed's relationship. Ed is her husband. She has sneaked away from Ed to find a little peace and quiet life, much to Ed's annoyance. Doreen dresses her husband's demands and lives as she wishes. The traditional female identities or gender roles are deconstructed or transgressed. In the epilogue, it is said that, quote, "I can find no rest. My head is filled with horrible images. I can't say I actually see them. It's more that I feel them. It seems that my mouth is full of birds, which I crunch between my teeth. Their feathers, their blood and broken bones are choking me. I carry on my work as a secretary." Unquote. So this transformation can be analyzed from different perspectives. Here birds could symbolize her hopes and the desire to fly to new horizons, along with her courage to speak and use her voice. Lack of speech denotes lack of identity. Thus, the concepts of self and identity are discussed in this session. So that's the fourth story. Now we are moving to the fifth story. That is the story of Paul. Paul is a businessman and he falls in love with a pig. Elements of bestiality and so sexual can be attached along with this. He is not able to save the pig from the slaughterhouse. When he rescues the corpse of the pig, he peels off its wrapper and it rises to dance with him. You can attach the elements of magical realism along with this. Even his wife, June, asks him about whether he is in love with the pig. At the end, Paul is shown as an alcoholic waiting for potential love. He has dreams and continual possession by his addiction. The association of Paul with pig is thus discussed, blurring the boundaries of love, life and sexuality. In the epilogue, it is said that when you stop being in love, that day is very empty. He is transformed and is thus ready to get connected with emotions. He is also ready to accept the openness and to make life exciting. So that is the story of Paul. Now we move to the sixth story. That is the story of Dan. Dan is a minister and is another of the ambivalent characters. When he is arrested, the police cannot tell whether he is a male or a female. He dances people to death, choreographing for them their private joy. He is a serial killer using pleasure as his weapon. For a while, Dan is aptly Dionysus. So at the end, in the epilogue, we see him with the image of his garden. He talks about it being green, whereas barren before. By the end, Dan's garden is growing well. Garden could thus refer to his life or the transformed life where he lives without a confused self. So the areas such as transgenders, LGBTQIA2S+, can also be addressed along with this. So that is all about the story of Dan the minister. And now we move to the next story, that is the story of Derek. Derek is an unemployed and he is really concerned with his bodybuilding and all. He is possessed by Pentheus and threatens violence against Dionysus. He is also possessed by Herculean Barbine. So Herculean Barbine is later known as Abel Barbine. It was a French intersex person who was assigned female at the time of birth and raised in a convent, but was later reclassified as a male by a court of law after an affair and physical examination. So Derek then experiences a sex change. He is also dismembered as Pentheus by Doreen, who has become Agave. So his transformation leads to daily satisfaction, and then he is in love with a lion tamer from Kabul. So in contrast to the original Pentheus, who was dismembered and died, he has been dismembered to gain a body and life. At last, in the epilogue, it is said that, quote, "My breasts aren't big, but I like them. My waist isn't small, but it makes me smile. My shoulders are still strong, and my new shape is least of it. I have almost forgotten the man who possessed the body. Unquote. So the ideas of acceptance, space, happiness are thus proclaimed through the story of Derek. The notions of transsexual and hermaphrodite can also be discussed along with this. So all these stories, these 7 separate stories, present the prominent characters being transformed after they being possessed by a spirit. As said earlier, the spirit could either be of a pagan origin or it is an urge of the people from within. No matter what their gender or sexual orientation be, they have a strong passion to transform into individuals with the realization of their identity and fulfillment of their lives. So that is all about the 7 separate stories within this play, A Mouthful of Birds. Yes, let's move to the critical comments and analysis made by critics and let's discuss. Helen Kaiser, professor of communications at the University of California, says that this play, A Mouthful of Birds, is an elaborate theatrical representation of violence, particularly violence enacted by women. Churchill and Land use drama to construct a dangerous history of gender and gender roles, employing madness both to unsettle normative categories of identity and to explore the risk involved in playing with subversive space. This can be analyzed along with the idea that postmodernism incessantly questions the existence of an ahistorical transcendent self and the autonomous being, arguing instead for Derrida's words, a subject which is an effect of the forces outside itself. Monique Wickick argues that feminism should begin with the deconstruction of the myth of a woman as submissive, sensitive, and nurturing, a myth constructed by patriarchy and sustained by modern psychology. The play dramatizes Butler's idea of fabricated unity of gender and is therefore a double performance, the performance of the performativity of gender. Let's see the themes now. As seen throughout the play, possession, obsession, passion, and violence form a recurring theme. Then violence is not used against women but also to empower them. The theme of gender subversion and the act of seeing women as a cultural construct can also be traced in this play. Several mythological allusions and elements of magical realism can also be traced from this play. The feminist reading of the play shows women violently breaking out of the stereotypical role. Yes, friends, we have now seen the play, the themes, and analysis. The importance of self, space, and identity is presented throughout the play. Let's acknowledge the presence of others and we should value them with dignity. Yes, that was the play, A Mouthful of Birds, written by Carl Churchill and David Land. I humbly request you all to read the original text to have a first-hand account of the events of the play. Thank you for listening.